Well, I'm not sure where Carlos Correa is. I'm sure that a few teams have made a couple of deals. And as we wrap up this year, we ask the question, is it better to pay too much or not enough? It is the final crossover with Locked On Diamondbacks for 2022. We're going to do many more in 2023. This is Locked On MLB. Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. If you don't believe me, there's my lower third. You can call me Sully. I am an Emmy-nominated television producer, certainly sitting in my in-laws' house somewhere in an undisclosed location in California. And apparently, the lighting here makes me look diabolical. But speaking of diabolical, right over there is the host of Locked On Diamondbacks. Please, mystery guests, enter and sign in.
Yes, Millard Thomas, host of Locked On Diamondbacks, and currently sitting in great lighting. The sun is hitting me at the perfect angle. It's golden hour right now. I should upload a pic to Instagram. Speaking of which, follow Locked On Diamondbacks on both Twitter and Instagram by typing in Locked On Diamondbacks in that little search bar, or you can follow my personal Twitter at CreatorThomas24. We're on all your podcasting platforms. We're on YouTube, of course, where you can see both of our mugs. So go follow Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube and all your podcasting platforms.
And as I take a quick sip there, follow us at Locked On MLB Pods. Same handle for Instagram and Twitter. And you can follow me on Instagram at Sully Baseball Podcast. And once I figure out this whole Mastodon thing, you can follow me there. I don't quite understand what it is. It may be like Friendster. Hey, speaking of Friendster, we're here with Millard Thomas, and it is the 28th day. We're recording this 28th day of December. And I don't know where Carlos Correa is playing. Carlos Correa has been the gift that keeps on giving to this podcast, because every time I think that we're all wrapped up for the year and Correa, I made a joke a couple of podcasts ago where I said his 13-year deal with the Giants was voided. We signed a 12-year deal with the Mets, which would be voided. We signed an 11-year deal with the White Sox, which would be voided. A 10-year deal with the Rockies will be voided. The 9-year deal. And I went down. Each one was a different team name. And finally, he signs a 1-year deal with the Twins. In other words, exactly what he was last year. I said that as a joke. May be coming true. You know, it's funny that when a lot of people started trashing the Giants and praising the Mets when they swooped in, when the physical failed with San Francisco and immediately signed a 12-year deal with the New York Mets, there's a lot of people showing how, chirping about how this is the Mets outsmarted the Giants and this and that. And never once did any of those people take into account, maybe the Giants weren't stupid. Maybe there was something wrong with his physical. And if he can't make it to the physical healthy, maybe you don't give him a baker's dozen worth of years on a contract. And now the Mets, who were crows, we got him, said, oh, yeah, he does have a bad physical. Now, not to get all on the tribute to the late Olivia Newton-John, let's get physical and let's talk about this situation. Is he going to be in a full body cast by the time pitchers and catchers report?
Who knows? I mean, my biggest question is, do they sign these contracts, work out the details, and then they're like, let's get the physical done after? Because I don't understand why these teams don't get the physical done first before talking about these long-term deals, before deciding on, should I make an investment over 10 years into this product? Let me at least test drive it and make sure it works correctly. Like, I don't understand why we do it backwards, signing them to a 10-year deal and then doing the physical.
Yeah, it is strange. It seems like that it's like maybe because he didn't end the year on the disabled list that I think this is going to be a formality, but you're going to be investing. Think about that's the contract that San Francisco offered Correa is longer than 3 presidential terms.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 13 years. 13 years. I mean, look, I've always been one to say, let the players get whatever contracts they can. And we'll talk a little bit about that at length at the final segment, because I have some thoughts about the people who want to curb owner spending. It's a free market system, and if they can get a 13-year deal, more power to them. I personally think it's borderline bananas to sign anyone above the age of 22 to a contract longer than 5 years. I mean, I know you'll get that 6th, 7th, or 8th year, but sometimes I think you're better off being the team that doesn't sign someone to a long-term deal. I mean, people have trashed the Red Sox for allowing beloved players to skedaddle, but they've also not been hampered with long-term albatross deals for the most part because they didn't get emotional about Pedro or Nomar or some of the other players that you and I would have been emotional about and sign them to 15-year deals and then watch them decay. Or they let Jacoby Ellsbury get injured on someone else's dime. And, but if they're going to, Correa knew he could probably get a big contract. And maybe here's where it gets fishy for me. If Correa knew there was some stuff that was happening, that would be a red flag. And none of this was disclosed, even the slightest, then I think he's going to have a hard time getting anything near the contract he wants.
Yeah, because how bad must his knee have been for the Giants to look at the physical and say, we're not even going to attempt to restructure this contract and put options in or whatever. We're just going to let you walk and let the Mets deal with this issue now. And now the Mets, after signing him to a decade-long deal, they're like, actually, hold up. We might actually have to put some provisions in here, maybe make this an incentive-based, a games-based proposition, because it seems like Carlos Correa's knee, he might have one of those degenerative conditions where you're like, all right, 8 years down the line, like he might only be able to play DH because you can't keep him in the field anymore. So that's going to diminish his value on the back end. But I know we're going to go get into it a little bit later, but I think this is why I believe we need term limits on contracts, because we shouldn't be able to go over 5 or 6 years. We saw it in the NBA. They eventually instituted max contracts in the NBA where you can't go over 5 years. I think baseball needs to introduce some sort of that proposition where it's like, all right, this player, he's worth this amount of money. You could pay him whatever you want. You could pay him 30, 40, 50 million a year, but you can't pay him over 5 to 6 years, because I think after 5 or 6 years, you create animosity between the player and the franchise. You create animosity between the player and the fans. Like the back half of those deals, teams don't want the player, fans don't want that guy on their team. Like there just creates so much animosity. And it's like, wouldn't you rather just pay for the best prime years of the player, the best 5, 6 years of that player, instead of paying for 5 or 6 years and then 6 years of not very good production? I just think if we brought term limits, it would even out the balance of power. More small market teams would get into it, and not every big market team would be able to go out there and just throw a 10-year bag at every free agent on the market.
All right. I rolled my eyes a couple of times. I hope you noticed that. I will say that you could take a look, maybe instead of instituting a rule, some people will see that some of these things don't work. Or maybe some teams will start to operate like, I don't know, the Atlanta Braves. The Atlanta Braves seem to be, I mean, I'll pull this thing up here that I saw. They signed Albies to a 7-year deal, Acuna to an 8-year extension, Olsen to an 8-year, Riley to a 10-year, Harris to 8. They just signed Murphy to a 7, Strider to 7. They're locking up the prime years of those players, of which they're going to get. Each one of those players will wind up playing at least a decade in Atlanta. Now, if at the end of that they want another big long-term deal, the Braves may let them skedaddle like they did with Dansby Swanson, like they did with Freddie Freeman, and have something new there. But if you're an Atlanta Brave, you're going to have all those players I just mentioned's entire prime in Atlanta. And none of those deals are 10-year deals. What they do is they say, you're pretty good. Why don't, instead of us stretching out the arbitration years and playing grab ass and all this other stuff, why don't we pay you for a long-term contract earlier than you normally would have, which means, you get taken care of for the rest of your life and everything like that. Atlanta Braves have a core, and it's when these contracts run out, they aren't going to be 35, 37-year-old men. So maybe instead of saying we have to institute a rule, we have to institute a way to police ourselves, maybe you could look over at Atlanta, a team that's had a tremendous amount of success recently, and say, maybe we should do it like them. Or maybe you do it what the Mets have done with Verlander and Scherzer and something. You you create absurd annual money for short-term gain. If Verlander and Scherzer bomb, they're not tied up in the long term. I've never been a big fan of we have to police ourselves because we can't help it. You could be smarter.
Yeah.
And I think we're finding out that signing some of these players to a long-term deal, may not be smarter. Or maybe if your goal is to win at least one title and you get that one title and you're broken down players the rest of the way, you say, we're fine with that. And that's a choice that the teams make. But I'm never a big fan of saying like, oh, we have to create these artificial limits, because there's no artificial limits on what the owners can make.
No,
on their revenue.
No, it wouldn't be on the player's salary, how much would they make? It would just be how long you could sign that player, because I think that would help balance out the power, because I think it's harder for a small market to justify paying someone 10 years for however X amount of money. I think it's easier for a small market team like the Minnesota Twins last year to say, okay, I don't mind paying Carlos Correa $35 million a year if it's only a 3-year deal. When you look
Why is Minnesota a small market? Why are we still talking about this gigantic metropolis with billionaire owners, and we're talking about them as if they're like a team in Muncie, Indiana?
Well, listen, the idea of a small market is a fallacy, but as long as your owner's not going to spend money, that's how they're going to operate.
That's on them.
Well, yeah, but as long as you're going to have no limits and people able to sign a 10-year bag, I think you're always going to have these teams that are deemed quote unquote small market teams always say, I can't afford to go those extra 3 or 4 years. But if everyone is only signed to like a 4 or 5 year max, I think it's harder to not justify a small market team going out there and spending a little bit more money, knowing you're getting all the prime years of, say, quality all-star player A.
All right. Well, you can all size market teams can sign their big star and buy out their prime and everything like that. They can all do it. And there's not one single team that can't. Not even the team you're about to say. No, not that one either. I'm talking to the listener. Okay. And so this notion of, we have to create an artificial limit on the players. First of all, that won't fly. If you want a surefire work stoppage, the easiest bet in the world you can make is that instituting something like that, limits on the players while having no limits on the owners. That's the biggest surefire bet that'll cause a work stoppage. If you're making any bets, head to Bet Online. It's your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to the College Bowl season, basketball, and the NHL. Check out the Coyotes. Hey. We've got it all at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can even find those on BetOnline as well. They got the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, that's where the game starts. Before we get into, I do want to get into what I call the entry fee that I think every team needs to make. I do want to talk about a couple of the other moves that were going around. You saw the Red Sox sign Corey Kluber.
Oh, God.
And I hope with that comes a time machine to take us back to when he was a Cy Young Award finisher. I had on Lauren from Locked On Red Sox the other day. Obviously, the Red Sox are a gigantic market, and they're acting like they are
the Twins.
They're acting like they're the Rays. What bothers me the most about the Red Sox isn't that they're going to have a bad year, which I think we were all pretty sure they're going to. It's that they're rudderless. I'll take a bad year. I think any Red Sox fan would take a bad year if they knew it's building towards something. Mm-hmm. I have no clue what this year team is building towards. No. None. And I have no faith in the general manager, who essentially, after Jeter Downs was DFA'd, we're looking up and we're saying, what, Mookie Betts for Alex Verdugo?
Yeah.
How many of the Eovaldi walked, Martinez walked, Bogarts walked.
Yep.
They traded Christian Vasquez for a guy who pleasured himself in the parking lot.
Oh, okay.
Chris Sale makes Carlos Correa look healthy, and he's signed. I don't,
offers.
I mean, I'm glad they signed Kluber because they may get 10 starts out of him. But I mean, you look up and go like, the Worcester Red Sox are going to be the starting rotation of this team, and I don't see a direction for the Red Sox. I don't see where they think they're going to even be. I don't mind a down year if I know it's filled with young prospects coming up and being able to hit some of the marks. I just don't see that. And this team needs to build a staff. This team has no identity in terms of its offense, with the exception of Devers. And and I know Devers is as good as gone. Yeah. You might as well deal Devers, but we saw that they wet the bed in the Mookie Betts trade. So why would I trust them in 7 quadrillion years that they're not going to wet the bed in the Rafael Devers deal?
Yeah, that's the annoying thing with the Red Sox is that lack of direction you're talking about, because they basically blew up their whole roster since 2018, and then they're making moves this offseason. Like, they're going out there, they're getting the Kenley Jansen, the Chris Martin, they signed Japanese outfielders to big deals, but then you let guys like Nate Eovaldi and Bogarts and JD Martinez walk in free agency. Doesn't make a lot of sense. I think when you look at the Red Sox and compare them to a team we talked about in the first segment, the Atlanta Braves, I didn't even get a chance to give my opinion. They're doing it right. I agree with you, Sully. I love what the Braves are doing. When I talk about the term limits, more for free agency, but when I look at the Braves, like, this is what I want the Arizona Diamondbacks to do with Corbin Carroll and all these other young guys. If you see, it's a little bit of a risk, but if your guy is good and he flashes in a 50-game sample size in that rookie season, or maybe the course of a season and a half, you sign that dude to an 8 to a 12-year deal, and you could do what the Braves do and have this whole core of 7 to 9 guys where where your roster is going to be over the next few years. It's what the Padres did with Fernando Tatis. It's what the Rays did with Wander Franco. It's even what the shout out Ethan Smith of Locked On Pirates. Even Brian Hayes got a mini long-term deal as soon as he debuted. Like, it's a smart play. Yes, there's going to be some risk. You're gambling on a guy who you might not even see matured or hit his ceiling, or maybe only have one good year production. But if that guy hits, you're going to get them on a major discount over the long term. And for the Boston Red Sox, this is where they messed up. They could have got Bogarts on a way cheaper deal than what he just signed with the San Diego Padres. Right. If he offered the money up early to Mookie Betts, you probably could have got him cheaper than what he signed with the Dodgers. And Rafael Devers, if you offered him a fat contract after his second year in baseball, when he looked like an MVP candidate, you would have had that guy locked up for 12 years until the age of 35, just giving you MVP season after MVP season. So the Boston Red Sox, they have no plan. They completely blew up a roster of young quality talent from the Mookies, the Devers, the Bogarts. It absolutely makes no sense. And right now, Benintendi, he's a case study for another day. But right now, for the D-backs, watch what the Braves are doing. If Carroll flashes more this year, if the Ryan Nelsons and the Dre Jamesons flash more this year, go lock up your young players, because the Braves got a core and a rotation and a lineup for years to come that could compete for a World Series.
Well, let's talk about the Diamondbacks for a second.
Hey,
because they did make a deal. They signed. They sent Daulton Varsho packing as the Blue Jays are continuing to try to fill the hole that was left from the vacancy of Teoscar Hernandez. They got Gurriel, was it Lourdes Gurriel Jr.?
Yep.
But they also, more impressively, they got Gabriel Moreno, who is, by all accounts, one of the best catching prospects in baseball. Now, they have Kirk at catcher, so his path was blocked. But the Diamondbacks may have – okay, what I think about prospects. Prospects are prospects until they're proven. Mm-hmm. And I've seen a lot of great prospects turn into quadruple A players. That being said, the Diamondbacks seem to have more of a plan than Boston does.
Yeah.
And they have a ton of young talent on their team. I don't know if you know this, but at one point they passed the Giants in the standings last year. They have a lot of young talent. They do have a centerpiece in Marte. It would have been great if the haul for Goldschmidt was a little more consistent than they got, but they are putting together young pieces on the team, which could make them, I think that, you and I have said this before. If everything goes right for them, I think they could be a fringe wildcard contender next year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're going to catch Los Angeles or San Diego, but I do think they could. I don't think a 500 season is out of the question. And just, again, a little bit more luck could mean 83 to 84 wins, which will probably keep them in a wild card hunt, at least from the end of September. If any team could be next year's Baltimore Orioles, that is the consistent bottom dweller who suddenly the young players click and some excitement starts to kick in the fan base, I think the Diamondbacks are a great case for that. And bringing in a blue chip catching prospect to maybe be the centerpiece for that position, I think is a really good use of, the Diamondbacks are going to get more out of Daulton Varsho than the Red Sox will out of Mookie Betts, probably.
Oh, yeah. Right now, that deal looks what the D-backs just did. Look, that deal for Varsho is a lot stronger of a deal than what the Red Sox did for Mookie Betts, which is just like an insane statement to say out loud. But this is the first time we've talked, Sully, since Carlos Correa spurned the Giants and signed with the New York Mets. So I'm back on the D-backs, finishing third in the NL West ahead of the San Francisco Giants. I thought Carlos Correa was changing the tide for third place, but no longer. The D-backs changed the tide once again after this trade. I actually think this trade might have lowered their ceiling a little bit for the 2023 season, just because I believe in Daulton Varsho's defense, power, and speed so much. But for the long term, for 2 years, 3 years from now, Moreno seems to be the better option because he's talking to Lindsey Crosby, could be like the next JT Realmuto type, seems to be an all-star level catcher, just one of the best hitters at that position that we've seen in a long time. So to add an offensive tool like that at your catcher position with some speed, with some defense as well, D-backs desperately needed another right-handed bat. That's what they got with Lourdes Gurriel. So now this lineup is a little bit deeper, a little bit more evenly distributed between righties and lefties. And they were trading from a position of strength with all the outfielders that they had. I didn't know where Daulton Varsho was going to go. I know the Locked On Astros guys hit me up every week talking about Daulton Varsho trades. I wouldn't have mind a little Christian Javier or Luis Garcia for Daulton Varsho, but to get back a blue chip prospect and the deal for Daulton Varsho, who has yet to make an all-star game, I was honestly shocked. It's not easy to get blue chip prospects. So when you see a guy like Moreno going in a trade, it's usually for the Juan Sotos or the Mookie Betts of the world. But to get him back in the Daulton Varsho trade and add another super utility player in Lourdes Gurriel that can just play all over the field, I think this is a perfect trade for both sides, because I was really down on the Blue Jays trading away Teoscar Hernandez. I thought he was a real thumper in that lineup. I thought that was a steal by the Seattle Mariners, but the Blue Jays has such a depth of catchers. Also, Danny Jansen had a really strong offensive year. Adding Daulton Varsho out there, they got better defensively. Added Kevin Kiermaier in the outfield as well. I like this trade for both sides. I think it might lower the ceiling a little bit for the D-backs in 2023, but over the long term, I think both teams are going to be happy with this trade.
Well, I mean, the Teoscar Hernandez trade to Seattle bolstered Toronto's bullpen. And we all saw in how the Seattle-Toronto wildcard series ended with an absolute cataclysmic collapse by Toronto's bullpen. You saw that was a potential Achilles heel. So I think by bringing in, was it Kiermaier and Varsho, to basically fill in for the hole that was left by Teoscar with an improved bullpen. But Gurriel, I think in the end, I think Toronto's in a very good position going forward into 2023. Gurriel strikes me as someone who may have a better year with Toronto because I think he's going to get the consistent playing time. Yeah, you and I talked beforehand that his power is basically disappeared, but he's still a solid contact hitter. He's still a solid hitter. And when you have a team full of young players, having a professional hitter just putting balls in play and getting hits can't hurt. Maybe you bat him, second in the lineup, where those hits can pile up, or you maybe bat him seventh or eighth in the lineup to keep the ball, to keep the line moving. I don't know. I'm of a big believer of if you have someone in there who's going, 2 for 3, 3 for 4, even if they're all singles, that helps. That helps for a team like Arizona who's trying to, you're not asking, he was trying to find their identity. Correa is not going to be the centerpiece of the team, obviously, but he could be a valuable hitter in that lineup.
Yeah, and they were desperate for a right-handed bat. They were searching for it all offseason, so he's going to fit that need. And he came up as an infielder through the minors, really hasn't played infield since 2019 because he's considered like an average to below average defender in the infield. But that is a possibility. Ketel Marte over the last couple of years, his numbers improved when he went to the DH spot. So maybe you get a little bit more Ketel Marte at DH, and then you could put Gurriel at a second base, or even put him at a shortstop, where the Dbacks have a pretty weak hole there with Nick Ahmed or Geraldo Perdomo from an offensive standpoint. So you could play Gurriel all over. He could even back up Christian Walker. That's probably what he's mostly going to do, and play some corner outfield as well. So I just love the addition of Gurriel, getting someone that's a proven veteran, a solid contact player, just a good major leaguer overall. And then you add Moreno, who's 22 and did have a cup of tea on the Blue Jays last year.
Yeah, he played a handful of games. He apparently played pretty well.
So going back to what we were saying earlier, if he once again looks good and Corbin Carroll looks good as well, those are two guys who are top 5 in MLB prospect rankings, who flashed in their first full season as major leaguers. Lock them in for 10 plus years, and then you can say, I got a superstar outfielder, got one of the best catchers in baseball, and then let's see who else comes with those two foundational pieces.